Let's Take This Outside with Marianne Iveson, the podcast where she speaks to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about why they connect with nature.
Steve Fleck is one of the leading endurance sports race event live announcers and commentators in North America for cycling, running, track and field, and triathlon races and events. It's a natural extension of life spent running, cycling, and racing triathlons since his mid-teens and wearing multiple hats in and around the business of endurance sports in sales, business development, marketing, and communications. He lives and plays outside in Aurora, Ontario with his wife, Paolina. Please welcome Steve Fleck. Steve Fleck, welcome to Let's Take This Outside. This is so exciting.
I'm super excited to be here. I've listened to many of your episodes in the past with past guests. Yes, I have. And this is a really great opportunity. Thank you so much for having me on.
I think we met on Twitter, and I think I liked your stuff, and we kind of chatted here and there because we have a lot of crossover in our lives between professional audio and announcing and sport and outdoor sport. I feel like it was kind of like a really natural fit for us to chat.
I agree. There's lots of overlap in terms of what our interests are, both recreationally and professionally.
I want to talk about you being an athlete. I want to talk about your job. I want to talk all those things. But first of all, you are coming, we're recording this a few days before Ottawa race weekend because I'm in Ottawa. You're in Aurora, which is just outside of Toronto, kind of like near Newmarket, right? Just outside of Toronto.
Yeah, you got your geography right. Newmarket is just north of Aurora. And so we are between Richmond Hill and Newmarket. That's where Aurora is.
Is there good nature there?
Good nature, meaning...
Is there is there nature? Is there a lot of nature options for you to go? Or
yes.
Is it... What is that?
No. Well, I think I know where you're going, and it's very suburban. So it is the outer GTA. You have to understand that it is the outer GTA. So it is very suburban, but our micro location where we live in Aurora, we're extremely blessed. If you look at where my street is, I'm not going to mention it on the air, but if you look at it, we're almost completely surrounded by park and green space on three sides. So we love where we are. My wife and I are both super active in the local community, riding, cycling, et cetera, et cetera. So we love our micro location in Aurora. There's other places in Aurora that aren't as blessed as where we are.
You're coming to Ottawa race weekend. You said you're taking the train. I'm sure coming back to events post-COVID has probably been really nice for you. But why do you choose the train versus driving versus, because you're always traveling for what you do. Why train for this one versus flying versus driving?
Well, there is a COVID connection. So during COVID, during all the cancellations and postponements, I lost abruptly nearly 2 years of work and income. Just got vaporized in March of 2020. It was kind of a slow descent to that place, but I realized at some point, probably about June of that year of 2020, that a significant amount of work and income was going to be going away from me. So we had to, both my wife and I, and she lost some income too, we had to quickly, go into a mode where we had to start to cut back on household expenses. We wanted to keep doing what we were doing. People that are self-employed were can-do kind of people, and what we wanted to do was keep everything going. And one of the things we did was jettison a car. We were a two-person, two-car household, and we got rid of a car. So that eliminated, an expense. And then when the pandemic receded and work came back for me, as you had mentioned, we saw no need to getting that second car back. We got rid of it for a cost saving, measure, but there's no need to have that second car. So we've been, doing without, that second car. Normally I would have just driven to Ottawa, and I have many times in the past for work and personal activities in the nation's capital. But I now take the train. I could fly, but it's just a lot of work for a 45-minute flight. The train is actually quite pleasant. I take the GO train down from Aurora. It's about 50 minutes to get to Union Station. And then I make my connection with VIA, and 4 hours later, I'm in Ottawa.
Well, I thought it was an important question. I'm glad that you answered that way, because it's, mostly I just talk about nature on this podcast, but I don't talk a lot about kind of my history. And it reminded me, I got laid off in the middle of the pandemic from radio and ended up starting my own company. And Let's Take This Outside as part of that. But, when you lose your income, I look back and realize how fortunate I am, how privileged I am that I bought my bike and I had my skis before I lost my job. Because, other than some maintenance and stuff, generally speaking, you can just go out and enjoy those things, right? I'm sure maybe, you got rid of one of your cars, but I'm assuming you looked at like your bike and your skis and all your gear and you're like, oh, thank God I still had those things to be able to, blow off some steam.
100%. And, riding didn't stop during the pandemic. Skiing didn't stop during the pandemic. Walks in the park didn't stop in the pandemic. Those just kept on. In fact, I cycled more in 2020 and 2021 than I had since I was, a professional triathlete a long time ago. And it was great. So there was a huge, upside. I enjoy cycling immensely and I had the time to do that. So there was no restrictions on riding. So I just got out and rode as much as I could every day that was good for riding. Same with skiing, cross-country skiing. We put in huge amount of cross-country skiing the 2 winters during the peak of the shutdowns in the pandemic. Alpine ski areas in Ontario were shut down. The Nordic skiing areas stayed open. Granted, we had to ski from the car. You weren't allowed to go into the chalet. So we just drove up to Hardwood Hills, which is our nearest place. It's an hour away, and we just park in the parking lot, ski whatever we ski, get back in the car and come home. But it never stopped, which is, to your point, we're really grateful that, we had those activities to do. I know for a lot of people, it was new to them, and, they bought a bike, they bought skis, they bought, hiking equipment or whatever it is. And there was massive, shortages in the retail market for all of those goods, during those times. But for us, it just carried on. It's always been a natural extension of what we do.
I'm a little bit selfish, but I always go on a love fest about Ottawa and how much I love it here and how accessible the outdoors is for people. How do you feel as someone who is from the Toronto area? How do you feel coming to Ottawa? Like, do you like coming to Ottawa race weekend? Do you like events here? What do you think of our area? A lot of questions.
I love Ottawa. There's probably only 2 other larger communities outside of the GTA in Ontario that I would move to, that my wife and I would move to. Our first choice probably would be Ottawa, and the second choice would be Guelph. I went to the University of Guelph, so it's more a familiarity with Guelph. Now, Guelph has changed a lot since I was there at the University of Guelph in the 1980s. It's grown sort of massively, but it's still relatively close to the GTA. And, for business purposes, you still have that connection. You can get a GO train from, Guelph to Union Station. So it would be a little bit like, living, in Aurora. But Ottawa would be a big break. But the thing I love about Ottawa is the outdoor sport culture, like in Ottawa, the access to Gatineau Park, the trail network that's in Ottawa, the cycling culture that's there, be it the utilitarian, cyclist or the more serious, cycling that goes on. That's a huge, attraction. And then the cross-country skiing in the winter. I mean, Gatineau Park is probably one of the top Nordic skiing areas in North America.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's the thing is it's nice to hear that because I'm very biased, but it's funny because it took me a while to realize where you were from because again, we've been following each other on Twitter, but I'm like, he would perfectly fit in with the Ottawa Gatineau community. Like you would just slide right in, join one of the groups. Like I could see you and your wife just sliding in and sleep seamlessly.
Oh, we would love it. I mean, I don't think we would like the longer winter per se, but the upside is you would get more skiing. I mean, we were done with skiing and I would still see pictures of you or others on social media still skiing probably 3 or 4 weeks after we were, done with it here in Southern Ontario.
I want to start from the beginning. You have been a lifelong athlete. Can you take me back to some of your earliest memories and what that looked like for you?
Ironically, one of the men that was most influential for me back in my early days passed away this week, and I'd be remiss if I didn't, mention him. Paul Post, the longtime coach for the Toronto Olympic Club. I believe he was one of the founders of the Olympic Club. Paul passed away earlier this week. He was 98 years old. He was highly influential for me. I got into distance running as part of the Toronto Olympic Club junior program when I was 14 or 15. ran with the club for 5 years, performed, moderately well as a middle distance and long distance runner through high school, early years of university. And then I discovered triathlon. I was one of the early people in on that first wave of triathlon in the 1980s. I may have competed. There's some discussion or debate about this. I may have competed in what was the first triathlon in Ontario, maybe all of Canada, in 1981. I was completely smitten and bitten by the bug. A lot of it was the newness of it all. I loved the fact that it was new, it was different. It was also really good for runners. If you were a strong runner, you tended to do really well. And cycling, I was okay at, but I adapted to cycling really well. I became a pretty good cyclist in the context of triathlon. Swimming was a bit more of a challenge, but I got there, and that was a lot of fun. That was back in the days when, in triathlon, we literally had no idea what we were doing. Like every day was an experiment. Every training session was an experiment. We swam with the swim clubs. We rode with the road cycling clubs. We ran with the running clubs, and we kind of bolted it, all together. There was no, training plan for triathlon. There were no coaches. So we were literally making it up as, we went along, and it was just so fresh and new. And looking back, I'm just extraordinarily grateful that, I had that opportunity in those, early days to be, part of that. So competed at a fairly, high level. We didn't even have a national team sort of back then. And I had sort of transitioned to longer distance triathlon racing, Ironman distance racing towards the end of that. So now we're into the 1990s, and qualified for the Ironman World Championships a few times. That I competed in Kona at the Ironman World Championships, and then, work responsibilities, family responsibilities started to pile up, and I sort of stepped cold turkey away from triathlon in 1997. Sort of stayed with running for a few years, because you can be fit on 4 or 5 hours a week and still run it at a sort of sub-national level, as a runner. So did that, and then got fully into the road, the road cycling. And now that's all I do. So road cycling recreationally, but at a very high recreational level in the summers, and then cross-country skiing in the wintertime. And I don't pin a bib number on, these days, unless it's something truly extraordinary. I mean, I'm at so many races and events. I'm literally at a race or event 35 weekends a year. So, when I get a weekend off, it's like, I just like going riding with my wife, or, riding with friends. I don't want to go to with all due respect, like, pin a bib number on and go to a bike race or a cross-country ski race. I do it recreationally, but people would view it as I would think, as a very high sort of recreational level.
Yeah, it's almost like too close to home to be like, yeah, it's like, now I want to separate my work and my personal life, right?
Yeah. And my wife and I, it's a thing. It's one of several things we share, and nothing gives me greater fulfillment than, going out for, 100, kilometer ride with her. We'll stop at a coffee shop, or we'll meet up with friends, and we'll ride with them. I mean, that's to me, that's a, when I have a weekend off, that's what I, tend to prefer to do.
You kind of already answered the question. I want to know what your active life looked like now. So biking mainly, cross-country skiing. So are you still running? Like, what else? Is there anything else you do? Like, what are you doing?
No, the running kind of fell by the wayside in the early 2000s. Just like little niggling injuries started to creep up. I have a herniated disc in my back. I'd say around 2002, 2003, sometimes somewhere in that area. And I haven't really run much since then, although I truly miss it. I miss particularly, Marianne, when I'm traveling, and, the type of travel I do, it's often, I fly into a place to announce or do some commentary work, and I'm on the ground for 48 hours. Like, that's it. You fly in. I'm not going to bring the bike, pack the bike along with me for literally like a 1 hour bike ride. So I kind of miss the running, because, when I traveled previously, for work like that, running was great. You could do some great exploratory stuff, with an hour run in a strange place that you've never been to and you might never be again. So it's really special to get out for that run. So walking has to suffice now for when I'm.
Walking's great. It's so
Walking's
underrated.
great. It is underrated, but you can't cover as much ground walking. So that's the one thing. And if you're used to covering that kind of ground physically running, walking always or cycling, walking always seems that much more, to use the walking term, pedestrian. And you don't cover as much geography physically. So you don't feel like you're seeing as much. But I do miss that. I miss the ability to go running when I'm in those places for work.
Do you think it's important to be an athlete and do what you do?
Yes and no. I think it helps to be an athlete, to have my background, because you have the lived experience. I never competed at the international level. I never competed at a world championships representing Canada or an Olympic Games. I was just, a few steps, below that level in running, in triathlon, and in cycling. So, but I know what it's all about. I know what the physical demands are, of the sports. I've followed them closely as a fan, for many years. So know the nuances of cycling competition, for example, which can be incredibly nuanced. It's often not about who gets his wheel across the finish line first, or, the woman that wins the race might not be the hero of the race. And this is hard for, people to understand, but you need to know those nuances, in a sport like cycling. So having that background is helpful, but I've also worked alongside some great commentators and announcers who've never been participants in the activities that they are actually commentating or announcing on. And that's fine. They have great voices. They spend a considerable amount of time in preparation beforehand, so that they've done their research, they've done their study, they've covered all the notes, and they know as much. And they may be more dependent on me, who might be alongside them as the expert commentator, to have all that lived experience, anecdotes that adds to that color and the enriching delivery that is great sports presentation.
Do you remember the first event you ever announced at, and was that the intention to make it a job for you, or was it something that was a one-off and you're like, oh my gosh, I love this?
So I started doing this professionally, like full time, around about 2013 and 2014, but I had been doing it on the side informally for quite some time. So Steve King, the legendary announcer at Ironman Canada, back around 2000. So I had raced at Ironman Canada myself as an athlete 6 times. My wife had raced there a number of times as well. She finished second in 2008. So we were kind of regulars, in Penticton at Ironman Canada. And Steve approached me one time. He just asked, I need some extra help, announcing at the finish line. Are you interested? And I said, I have nothing else to do on race day. Why not? So I helped out Steve that year and sort of learned the ropes, working alongside one of the true pros, of the craft, from those, early days. And it was a phenomenal experience working with Steve. And I was also thrust into the limelight very quickly. That was early days with mobile microphones. And so we were given them by the PA company that was supplying the sound. And so Steve said to me, you go down and you interview the winners when they come in and across, the finish line. So the men's winner that year was Peter Reid, 3-time Ironman world champion, winner at Ironman Canada a number of times. And I knew Peter. I mean, Peter was sort of a friend and acquaintance of mine through the sport of triathlon. So there I am at the finish line. I'm got a microphone in my hand, and I'm interviewing like Peter Reid at the finish line. And, everyone thought it was amazing and great. And I did, a phenomenal job at it. No training. I mean, there's no school you go to for this. And so, Steve was a real important sort of catalyst in terms of, getting me into this. He's been a phenomenal friend and a great mentor, through all of this. But I'm forever grateful for him for, making that ask of me, to give it a go a number of years ago. So I just sort of did that on the side for a number of years. And then in 2014, I was abruptly let go from my last sort of full-time job. And another business mentor of mine suggested to me, hey, you should really like blow up this announcing work that you're doing because you're really, really good at it. And again, this was another one of these amazing moments in my life, Marianne, that you're looking back and you're going, wow, I'm just so grateful that this happened. I mean, not only did this man suggest this, he also sort of helped me up because I'd always been an employee. And so going out on your own and doing something on your own for yourself was a completely foreign, thing to me. I just like everyone in my family, is an employee, and there's teachers and guaranteed pensions and all this kind of stuff. And so, but he said, Steve, I want you to do this and I'm going to help you out. I'm going to give you a part-time job and some guaranteed money for 6 months. And unless I had that, and it was okay money. Like it was money that I could live off of for 6 months if this whole announcing and commentary thing fell flat on its face. So I was extraordinarily grateful for that. I plunged in, and I had a whole bunch of work sort of booked up for that first year that kind of made it viable. So, that from that point on, I was kind of all in on the announcing and the commentary work.
That's so inspiring, and I relate to that story so much.
Let's Take This Outside now has a newsletter. Keep up to date with outdoor news, events, and great discount codes and deals from our partners. Sign up today at letstakethisoutside.ca.
What does your life look like right now as a live announcer and commentator? So you're coming to, Ottawa race weekend this weekend. You're doing road races, you're doing cycling, you're doing indoor track cycling too, right? Like what kind of stuff are you commentating? And maybe what I'm going to ask you to play favorites. Maybe what's your favorite?
To bring you up to present, I'll go backwards a bit. So I started off doing this in triathlon. So initially it was just, that's my sport. I'm well known in the triathlon community. But the problem in Canada anyways, is the triathlon world is quite small. The triathlon world is quite small, as from a business perspective, even worldwide. I mean, it's dwarfed by cycling and running. So I looked at that and I said, well, I can't make a living off of just announcing triathlon races and events. That's just not going to work. So I quickly, branched out. And again, I'm very fortuitous, lucky, grateful that I'm a triathlete. I don't just know triathlon. Because you're a triathlete, cycling, running. So I started, reaching out to running races. I started reaching out to cycling events and was getting work announcing at them as well. So one of the things I've really prided myself on is my versatility. There's peers of mine and colleagues of mine in the US that because they work in a bigger market in cycling or in running, that they can exclusively focus, on running or cycling. If I'm just working in Canada, I can't do that. So, but if you bolt together triathlon, cycling, and running for me in Canada, it's a viable business. The real upside is it's spilled over to a decent amount of announcing and commentary work for me in the US as well. So the upside is significant. That versatility last year led me to announcing at 9 different national championships in the US and Canada. And this is something I'm extraordinarily proud of. I mean, I covered off national championships in, let me get this straight. So track cycling, road cycling, gravel cycling, track and field, cross country, and road running and triathlon. So 9 national championships. This year, I think I'll do 10. If we get to the end of the year, I will have announced or commentated at 10 national championships in Canada and the US. So the repertoire is probably wider than most people do. And it really started because my market in Canada was so small and I needed to branch out. But the beneficiary of this has been me selfishly, in that my market is now, that much bigger. I believe you also asked me what I like best of the, yeah, it's hard for me to answer because I'm such a fan and a geek, of all of them, triathlon, cycling, and running. I, I don't know. I mean, I love, probably cycling is the most, because we've already talked about that. I love all the stories within the story, at a bike race. It may not be about who wins the race, at the Grand Tours, the stage races, you've got all the different jerseys and the team competitions and stuff like that going on. And the stories just go on, forever. And it often takes a lot to describe to the average person, what it all means. I think that's one of the things that makes cycling probably attractive to, super hardcore fans like myself, but it can be confusing for average folk as well. But that's where a good commentator or announcer can come in and, try and explain those stories to people.
We're trying to answer that question of your favorite sport, but is there one that is maybe most, I guess, is it still cycling the most thrilling for you? The one that you get most into?
The track cycling is pretty special. I mean, the competition, the tightness of the racing, the fact that it's happening right in front of you, the fact that they're, can be traveling 75 kilometers an hour, as they head towards the finish line. I would say track cycling, if there's a single sort of sub-discipline, is maybe the most exciting to call. I mean, there was a finish at the Canadian Track Cycling Championships back last fall where it was 2/1000th of a second between first and second in the men's Kieran race. And the defending champion, Nick Wamas, lost by 2/1000ths of a second. So when they're coming across the line visually, you can't see that. So it was high drama, the final lap of the track. These two riders literally shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, handlebar to handlebar, all the way to the line. And then, your human eye can't see 2/1000ths of a second. And we had to wait until the rendering of the photo finish, and then deciding by the photo who won. But we actually you could see on the photo finish, and I know we're audio here, we're not visual, but you could see that it was literally a couple of millimeters, the difference between the front wheel of the winner and the second place rider. That's what 2/1000ths of a second looks like. So you wish that every race was like that, but they're not. They're not. But you get a lot of those in track cycling.
Have you ever got something wrong and then had?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. There's times when you get things wrong. You get things wrong in commentary, and people are on your back on Twitter or social media. You're calling a rider wrong. I think I did that at least once. When I just last week for Flow Bikes, I was doing the commentary for the Vuelta Burgos Feminas. It's a 4-day women's world tour stage race in Burgos, Spain. I wasn't in Spain. I would have been like doing in Burgos. It's a beautiful area, but I was doing it from the confines of my home studio remotely for Flow Bikes. But there was one stage where we had a very close finish, and I wasn't 100% sure who was second. I knew the rider that won, Lorena Wiebes, won, but I made a missed call on the rider who finished second was. So I had to wait till the data came up to verify that. So yeah, you make mistakes like this. Yeah, you make mistakes like this from time to time. People do get on your back, about it, but there's not much you can do in the moment, in the heat of the moment, in the flow of the moment. When you're wrong like that, you just have to sort of accept it. You try to do your best going in by doing your research, but that's the other amazing thing about our sports, whether it's running, cycling, or triathlon, is the athletes are telling the story out there. We can make all the prognostications and predictions we can beforehand. Lorena Wiebes, she's Dutch. She rides for the SD Works team, was the clear favorite, for that stage. So I was right on that call. I knew it was Wiebes who was charging, for the line, but I didn't know sometimes the other riders. We don't know who they are, and you can't be 100% right sort of all the time with that. The other time that's unfortunate, is sometimes with live announcing at large, marathons, that type of thing. Like maybe in Ottawa, we're getting incorrect data, from the course, from the timing and results company, which from time to time does happen. This technology has evolved and gotten better and better over the course of time. But if the data is wrong and that's all we have to go on, I mean, that's all we have to go on. And we could make some blind, pull a name out of a hat sort of prediction that who that person is. But sometimes we have to sort of, go with the data because that's the only known thing that's out there. But even that can be wrong occasionally. But again, it's in the flow and the heat of the moment. So you kind of just go with it at the time.
You were just mentioning athletes, and I think you above anyone would know this question. What athletes, let's specifically say Canadian, should we be on the lookout for? I know that it's Derek G, right? It's Derek G. Is that Ruby West's partner? Yeah, because I've interviewed Ruby really early in this podcast, and she was talking about how she trained with her partner and her boyfriend in Europe. And I just thought it was really cool that this guy is killing it.
So Derek is for the people listening in, Derek is having a phenomenal debut in a Grand Tour. He's never done a Grand Tour. So the 3 Grand Tours in professional cycling are the Tour de France, which is probably the most popular. Everyone has, even people outside of, cycling know about the Tour de France. The other 2 are the Giro d'Italia and the Vuelta a España. So it's the Tour of Spain and the Tour of Italy. The Giro and the Vuelta for pure cycling fans are actually better races. They tend to be crazier and wilder with more demanding stages. The weather in Italy for the Giro, the first 2 weeks of the Giro, has been absolutely horrendous. They had to cancel portions of some of the stages because it was snowing, like at higher elevations in the mountains, in the Dolomites. It can be just crazy racing. So fans of cycling really know that the Giro and the Vuelta are where you watch if you're a real fan. The Tour de France, everyone watches that. But for Derek, this is his debut in a Grand Tour. It's his first year as a full-on pro with a contract with the Israel startup Premier Tech team, which is based in Israel, but there's a huge amount of Canadian involvement in the team from the ownership perspective, the management perspective, and then riders on the team. Michael Woods, who's from Ottawa, rides for Israel Premier Tech as well. So, but for Derek, I mean, this has just been a phenomenal, 2 weeks, and we still have a couple stages to go. He's been second several times, I think 3 times. He's been second 3 times. One time in a true photo finish, he just missed the win. He's currently sitting second in the points competition, at this year. He won't win it. He doesn't have a chance of winning it, but he sits second in the points competition. But all of the commentators have been, going on and on about who is this guy? Who is this Derek G guy from Canada? And it's been a phenomenal, breakout story for him. It's not an overnight success. He's been riding for, at a high level for, 7 or 8 years, but this is his first year racing professionally, at this level, at the World Tour level, in Europe, and his debut in a Grand Tour. This will really elevate his profile, as a cyclist. It's a sport often where if you have a Grand Tour like he's had, he will be getting offers from other teams, but probably before the end of the year is up. I don't know what his contract is exactly with Israel Premier Tech, but wouldn't be surprised if he's going to get offers from other teams, because he's exhibited the kind of fitness, the kind of form that another team would want, maybe not to be their lead rider, but to be what they call in cycling a domestique. So to be a helper for another leader. Like I could see him coming back and maybe not the Tour de France. It's a hard double to do. But in years past, Mike Woods has targeted the Vuelta. It runs in September, so late August into September. So Mike Woods, he might contest the Vuelta overall. It's a much better race for Mike Woods for GC or general classification, overall. So Derek might, be assigned to that team to help Mike Woods win the Vuelta, overall. So that would be phenomenal. I mean, if only one Canadian, to the best of my knowledge, has ever won a Grand Tour, and that's Ryder Hesjedal, who won the Giro d'Italia back about 10 plus years ago.
I kind of put words in your mouth with Derek. I assumed you might have said him anyway. But is there any other Canadians, maybe in another sport or female, that you can think of that's really kind of blowing up right now?
Well, we're going to be seeing two of them this weekend in Ottawa, and I'm going to have the pleasure of interviewing them at the press conference on Friday. That's the great Mo Ahmed. He holds the Canadian 5,000 and 10,000 meter record, silver medal in the 5,000 at the Tokyo Olympic Games, and Cam Levins, who holds currently the Canadian half marathon and marathon records. That's going to be a great clash on the roads. Mo making his debut on the roads. He's never run a road race before, only on the track, and a bit of cross country when he was in college on scholarship at the University of Wisconsin back when he was at that age. So this will be an interesting clash. Those two have really taken, men's distance running in Canada to the next level. I can't, the average person I don't think understands how competitive distance running is. There's countries like, I know there's lots of talk about drugs and doping and whatnot, but I'm going to put that aside for the time being. But countries like Kenya, they'll have 200 runners in Kenya alone that'll run faster than the fastest Canadian, will. So just to put that into perspective, like in a given year. So for someone, like Mo Ahmed to finish second, and he's consistently been in the top 5-10, the last two Olympics and several world championship cycles in the 5,000 and the 10,000 meters. So to finish second, like in the 5,000 meters, like that's one of the best, Canadian sports performances, like for sure in that given calendar year. But running doesn't get the sort of the street cred, in Canada, like other sports do. So it's a bit diminished, and I'm perhaps a bit, biased. And Cam as well in the marathon. I mean, he's broken the Canadian, marathon record twice. He's lowered it by, I think, 4 minutes now. He was fourth, at the World Championships in Eugene in the marathon last summer at the World Athletics World Championships. So those two, in particular, for me, for the sports that I really cover, those are, big, breakthroughs. The Derek G thing is a different kind of breakthrough. That's a young athlete kind of breaking through. Both Mo and Cam are more towards the end of their careers, and to see them, elevate their performances to the levels that they have is extraordinary. When I think running in Canada for the women, what I like what's going on is Canadian women's running from the 800 to the marathon has never been deeper and more competitive. Unfortunately, it's not yielded any medals, at the Olympic Games or the World Championships, but it's a real battle to get one of those three spots, like on that national team to go to the Olympics now, the last two Olympics, and then the last couple of World Championships, to get the standard, to get the World Athletic Standard, and then get one of those three spots on that team in the 800 through to the marathon has been a battle. And that's great to see. I don't think Canadian women's running, middle distance and long distance running, has ever been deeper or more competitive. And it is going to lead to medals. Like we will get there. You need to have that sort of base of phenomenal performance to elevate, one sort of superstar like a Mo Ahmed to, silver level status like he did in Tokyo in 2021.
Steve, I have one more question for you, but you reek of passion, and I know people are going to love this interview. And I really appreciate this so much, not even just, from the standpoint of you announcing in your job, but also what you've built. Like my entrepreneur side is really appreciative of that and hearing that side of your story. So thank you for sharing. But do you have a dream event that you like to be a part of?
Well, that might be coming up this August. So some news came to me personally just a month or so ago. The UCI chose me to be part of the live announcing team for track cycling for the UCI, what they're calling a Super World Cycling Championship. So starting this year, 2023, every 4 years, the UCI is going to combine all the cycling disciplines, with the exception of cyclocross, into one Super World Championship. So track cycling, road cycling, mountain biking, BMX, some other smaller disciplines within cycling. The World Championships will take place in Glasgow and Edinburgh this August. This will be the highest level of work and sort of prestige, of live announcing that I've done. So I'm incredibly humbled and honored to sort of, have the opportunity. There's been many people that have helped along the way. Literally every race director, every event organizer that I've worked with has been helpful in terms of me honing my craft, getting to where I am, to get to that opportunity. So that's to come. But going backwards, really, I think the catalytic event for this, and often an event I cite as being, extraordinary to me, was when I announced at the Para-Track Cycling World Championships that we held here in Canada at the Milton Velodrome, the Mattamy National Cycling Centre, in 2020, just before the pandemic started. I think it was in February at some point in time, and that year, and I was asked by Cycling Canada to host the live announcing in the building, for that. And I saw things at, that 3 days that I did for that are just absolutely phenomenal. It's hard to describe, to see athletes compete at this level who, don't have an arm or don't have a leg or have some like a cerebral palsy, type of, nerve, problem. They're walking to the bike with a walker or being helped to the bike, and then they're on the bike and they're competing, on the track. There's I was told afterwards that there's something in the brain when you're riding a bike that fires up neurons and parts of the brain that when you have something like cerebral palsy or things, a disability like that, the bike does something in the brain. And so to witness that firsthand is just, extraordinary. I mean, some of the times I nearly had tears in my eyes, watching them compete, doing the things, that they do. And I'm super pleased that in Glasgow this summer in August, it will be combined. It'll be para and able-bodied track cycling world championships together. So this will be the second time that I've been able to announce the para competition, and I'm really looking, forward to that.
Thank you for representing Canada so well in these things, and thank you for sharing your story. And because I'm volunteering on Friday for a little bit. What time are you going to be there?
I'm not sure. I think the press conference is at 2:00 in the afternoon.
I'm there from 12 to 4 at a booth, so maybe I'll try to find you
at Lansdowne Place in the horticultural building. That's where the press conference will be. I think it's at 2:30. So I am running the Q&A. Top competitors in the marathon is one press conference session we're doing, and then we're doing a separate one for the 10K road championships. And the feature of that will be the clash between Mohamed and Cam Levins. We do have some great women that are running, and I feel remiss in I talked about the women, the depth of the women's competition. Melinda Elmore is running the marathon, and that's great. And Natasha Wodak is running the 10K on the road. She's a defending champion and an Olympian and the current record holder for the women in the marathon. So there's some talented Canadian women taking place as well. It's not just the Mo and the Cam show and the 10K road championships.
Steve Fleck, thank you for joining me, and I can't wait to see you this weekend.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an immense pleasure.
Thanks for listening. For more Let's Take This Outside, go to letstakethisoutside.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.